All right, welcome back to another edition of Scaling Secrets. I am your host, Alex Mahaz, and today we have another exciting guest joining us, a true expert in the world of franchising and business growth. Chris Connor has been a franchise consultant working with business owners and brands to support growth through franchising since 2001. His experience in the franchise development industry has began with a Chicago-based franchise consulting firm where Connor had the opportunity to work a variety of successful franchises, including Jimmy John's, European Wax Center, 911 Restoration, Smash Burger, just to name a few. We can go into more later. And, his remarkable, successful career of just developing over 400 franchise brands is really astonishing. So, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome to Chris Connor. How you doing, Chris?
Great. Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you, and I'm really excited to dive into your story. But I want to start from the beginning, the early days, developing your career and getting into the franchise consulting world. What really inspired you to start out there?
So I went to school for business, and my father was in business. I always knew I wanted to go into business, but I never really had any introduction to entrepreneurship. And to me, I think probably a lot of people think you if I ran into an entrepreneur or knew of one or heard of one, I usually thought they were crazy. It was like, what, how in the heck do you do that? How do you take that risk? How do you be out on your own and really have no support and all the stuff that comes with it. My thought of what you do with your career is you go to work for a big company, you work for them for, as long as you can, you save up in your 401k and, one day retire. And I worked for a couple of big companies, Wilson Sporting Goods, Wyndham, hotels, corporate, and then Southern Wine and Spirits. And that was just what I thought I would do, find a job. A good friend of mine came to me. I'd started my MBA at DePaul in Chicago and was kind of like, I guess, improving my resume. And he came to me and was like, hey, you want to come to work for my grandfather's company? He does franchising. And really, all I thought of it was a better job than what I was doing and a better opportunity. Went to work, and I immediately fell in love with entrepreneurship, being able to work with entrepreneurs, small business owners, the passion, the enthusiasm. Most entrepreneurs, I mean, these are people that had everything on the line, their blood, sweat, tears, everything in it. And I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. So I worked for them for 8 years. And that was where I had that opportunity to work with a bunch of those brands, Jimmy John's, Auntie Anne's, Ace Hardware, European Wax Center. Most of them were from the very beginning, too. It was like Jimmy John, setting up his sandwich chain and then helping him get started and built up and then going to market. It was really, really exciting work, and loved what I did, loved the experience. 2008 and 9 came, and the place kind of fell apart. So I'd never really thought about doing my own thing, but then I'm sitting there. I have a mortgage payment. I've got a new family, and it's like, all right, I need to pay the bills here. What could I do? And I knew the space, so I started my own company, FMS, Franchise Marketing Systems, FMS. We do a lot of the same work that I was doing before, but we also sell franchises. We market and we sell them. And we've been running now since '09. So we're like 15 years in. We've done this with 1,000 different brands and sold over 10,000 units across them. And still absolutely love working with entrepreneurs. It's just my passion and so much respect and just love doing it.
I really resonate a lot with the early days, taking that jump. I also studied business in college, and, I had that, track record. My mom worked her way up the corporate ladder. My dad was an entrepreneur. So I was lucky to have, one parent that was kind of able to show me the ropes and have that different perspective. But it's tough because, you take on a lot of risk, especially, starting a new business. And there's a lot of different challenges. And even like you said, as you were growing and then you got to the recession 2008 and 9, there was, I'm sure, a lot of tough decisions and conversations you had to have. So it is a tough jump, but it's very rewarding if you stick with it. And I think you know the right person has the right mentality to be entrepreneurial. So
And I think like me, a lot of folks get pushed into it. It's entrepreneurship by force. And at the time, it seemed like a really bad thing. And I look back on it, it's like, man, thank goodness we went through a crazy recession in '09, because I probably never would have done it. I wouldn't have taken the leap, but ended up being a really good thing.
yeah, it's interesting too. A lot of people say there's the most opportunities come a recession, not even financially, but with just everything. So um, that's a good perspective to have. But I want to dive in. Obviously, franchising is a fantastic opportunity for entrepreneurs looking to grow their business. But what advice do you have for business owners who are considering franchising their brand and just are kind of unsure the right move for them?
So I have the opportunity to talk with business owners every day, and the kind of discussions that we're having about the franchise model and about what they like to do with their brand. Franchising is not for everyone. And I guess like most things, there's some profiles of people that franchising fits, and others that it doesn't. There's some business models that it doesn't fit, and others that it fits really well. But I would put out there that franchising is really for everyone. I think the easy go to is to think of fast food, hot dogs, chickens, hamburgers, stuff like that. But a large majority of the brands that we've worked with have not been in food. I mean, maybe 30% of the companies that we franchised have been food service. So it's definitely for everyone potentially. So I think every business owner that is looking at scaling their model and growing their model, they should have franchising on their radar as one of the options. I try to help walk them through that part of it, just the fact that this could be something that potentially any business could look at. The next part of it would be I put it to the business owners, what would you like to do with your brand? And if in the end you're just done, you're overworked, you're at the point where you just want to step away from it, this probably isn't the option. You kind of have to go deeper in franchising before you can take the steps back. So that would be the other thing. Some entrepreneurs would like to eventually sell their company and have like a significant exit where they could build a valuation and have a really successful exit. I've worked with a bunch of brands that we started with one unit and had 100, $200 million plus exits. Jimmy John's was 2.5 billion. That was probably the hallmark of those. But franchising is definitely a channel for you to build a brand, add asset value, and eventually position for an exit at some point. If the interest is in scaling it, this could definitely be a way to do it. Once we decide that, hey, that could be a viable thing for me, for my business, then I want to know about the model. Tell me, how do you get customers? Is that replicatable? How do you hire people and manage day-to-day operations and staff and create a great customer experience, whether it's food or service? Is that replicatable? Can we teach that? Can we train that? Can we show people how to do it? Is what you offer viable in more markets than the market that you're in? Like if we do something that's so unique and so specific that it's tough to find other consumer demand in other markets, probably going to be tough. It has to make money. So we talk a lot about financials. It's not only about money. So I think that's one of the misconceptions, that a business has to be wildly financially successful for them to consider it. But we need to be able to show that it earns enough profits to be able to justify the investment for a franchise owner. And there's different benchmarks that we look at for each industry. So we talk through a lot of that stuff, and very consultative, interactive kind of engagement. Try to stay away from selling anything, and just talk through the whole thing and see if it might be a fit.
Hmm. Definitely. And yeah, like you touched on, the market conditions, and that's so important too to evaluate, are you in the right market? Does this make sense? Is there a model that you can really scale this? And evaluating and asking those questions. And yeah, you said too, money's not everything, but definitely you want a cash flowing franchise day one, or at least, some type of profitable franchise. So,
It's a big piece. And A lot of times I guess there's kind of sort of opportunities that I will run into. One is a model that has created a market. It's totally different. There's no franchises out there like it. And we have an opportunity like that, and the business is viable. There's a importance and opportunity in being fast. Let's get this to market. Let's open up market share. Let's get people involved in this. And the faster you position your brand and your organization as that industry leader, you're going to be in the best position. In other cases, we're going into a market that's competitive. There's other brands out there, which is fine. We just need to make sure that we have a unique selling proposition. What can we use as a differentiator against those brands, and how do we position against them? So making sure we map that out and talk through it before we go to market as a franchise system.
Yeah, and like on the flip side of that, let's say you want to be as hands off as possible, and you're really just looking to invest into a franchise model or business. Should potential franchisees look for when evaluating different franchise opportunities? And like how can they really assure that they're making a wise investment?
Yeah, and I'm a big believer in franchising both ways. My main work is in helping companies become a franchise system. But I personally invested in 7 different franchise businesses, like owned franchises too. Just from doing this, you run into good concepts and good models and stuff. Then I've seen it from what I've done, just that people can do really well on the franchisee side also. It does have to be the right fit. It does have to be the right business model. Um, Even though franchising gives an entrepreneur a path and an opportunity to get into business more efficiently, it does not take the responsibilities off their plate of still running a business. So that's one of the misconceptions, I guess, just where I run into where um, as a franchisee, you need to be in the right business. You need to be prepared to jump into it. You need to manage it. You can hire people to run it for you and build a team around you to do it, but you still are the owner and you still need to be the leader of this, or else it's probably not going to be as successful as it could be.
Mhm.
Um, the first thing I recommend is look at the industry and look at what you'd be doing every day. Make sure you want to do the work that you're getting into. And it seems simple, but
Super important.
yeah, like people buy a frozen yogurt place because they like frozen yogurt, and it's like they hate the business after they're in it, or other examples like that. So make sure you want to be in the industry. Make sure you want to do the work. I always recommend go out and shadow, go out and spend a day in the field, really immerse yourself in it to make sure you're in the right space and you're doing something that you can see yourself doing for a while. Um, the second part is understand the unit economics. You're investing in a franchise. You have to come up with money for hard costs, equipment, rent, signage, construction, whatever those costs would be to get the building open, the business open. If it's a services model, you have to have a vehicle and equipment and whatnot. And then you need to have money for soft costs. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs miss is they don't take into account the fact that most businesses won't make money day 1, day 2, day 3. It takes sometimes months, maybe even years to get to the point where it's like really profitable. And if you don't have money in the bank when you start the business, you effectively could be already dead and not even know it. You're in a sinking ship. Um, I always recommend work with a planner. People like me can help franchise people go through that, buyers go through that. But there's also like resources like SCORE that's put on through the SBA, and they offer free consulting and coaching. Some help, get someone to bounce ideas off of. It's not that the buyer themselves isn't capable of it, but we as entrepreneurs, when you're getting into a business, it is almost impossible to not get some rose colored glasses on and see things better than they are. And you think that the revenue is going to grow faster than it will and the costs won't be as much as they are. Have someone else to bounce it off the ideas, and it'll help keep you making good decisions and decisions that are vetted.
Definitely. Yeah, and I like how you touch, know your overhead costs, know your soft costs, know those expenses that are going to creep up, especially when you're first launching that franchise or you're looking to, invest. And I think, too, you should always assume the worst. Obviously, consult with somebody, about the numbers and making sure it makes sense, but always assume the worst and make sure that, you have enough cushion, whether that's financially or your team is big enough to help you manage those downfalls that are going to happen, because eventually they do in any business.
It does, yeah. Nothing goes on a straight line in entrepreneurship. It's always like that kind of up and down and up and down.
Yeah,
Um,
roller
you just,
coaster.
yeah, yeah, that'll give you the cushion to work through it. The second part of that is not all franchises are created equally. And it's like any other thing, where you might have a franchise system that's run really well and one that's run really poorly. And if you, as a franchise buyer, are spending your time and doing your due diligence, you can usually figure that out and get a feeling as to whether or not you're getting into business with someone who has your best interests in mind and is looking out for your success, or the other side is they're just trying to get your money. Do your due diligence, go through the interview process, interview other franchisees, spend time really getting to know the disclosure document and the franchise agreement. I recommend get a franchise lawyer to help you do that and review that and get to know all the good and bad that's in there. All those things might cost a little bit of money. They'll take time, but it will help you avoid missing opportunities, potentially stepping on a landmine. So it's worth it. It's worth it.
Definitely, yeah. You don't want some big obstacle to creep up years down the line, and then realize all that hard work and all those systems you started building and had in place, and it's all kind of for nothing. So completely agree. But obviously, startups have increasingly grown. It's a very trendy word and business. A lot of popular startups are coming into play. And what, like in terms of the relationship between franchising and startups, how do those, can they coexist together? Do they collaborate? Can you just, touch on your experience with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, for one, every franchise began with a startup. Every one of these brands that's out there now, that now you might see on every street corner, and has really big brand presence, started out as an entrepreneur with an idea, then created a brand, created a business model, and at some point they realized there was a bigger market for what they did, and they started duplicating it through franchising. So the two are completely interlinked. On the franchise buyer side, the number of startups in the US, the last I looked at the SBA numbers, it was like a record by, I think, twice as many as ever before. New businesses in the US started, I think, the year after COVID, 2020 was like a little bit lower, but still almost double the amount that had ever been started before in the US. And we're still on that track. People are starting businesses at a really aggressive rate. I think maybe COVID pushed people to start thinking outside of the box. I think working virtually from home probably did a little bit of that too. And then also layoffs too. You have people lose a job and then say, hey, I'm going to go do something on my own. When people look to start a new business, franchising is one of the options. And, the large majority of people do their own thing. I mean, that's just the way the numbers work. The people that end up in a franchise model versus doing a startup usually see enough value in the systems, in the brand, and having someone as a coach and a mentor provide them a blueprint to be able to do the business based on their experience. A pure startup doesn't have that. And generally speaking, a pure startup has a success rate of this, again, like SBA numbers, it's like 5%. It's really low. And that's after 5 years, like 5% of them are still in business. On the franchise side, hard to get exact numbers, but it's like 85% success rate after 5 years. And the reason you have this crazy difference is because you've got someone who has coached that franchisee. They've given them direction, they've given them support, they've given them a brand, they've given them vendor relationships. Everything that the franchisee would have to figure out on their own, they've now had someone hand it to them and give it to them. And as a result, you get a much higher rate of success. And the thing that I think dissuades people from franchising is you do have to follow the system. You do have to go under their brand. You do have to ultimately be under the direction of the franchisor. Some people, you know, don't like that or don't want to be a part of that. Um, but the model works great for the people that like that structure and want that structure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you said, with having that blueprint in place, having that plan already kind of mapped out could save you, years of, headache, really trying to get that startup off the ground. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of times that is probably one of the biggest benefits to franchising in general. When you buy one, it's not necessarily that franchise businesses will do higher gross volume or have higher profitability or something like that. What does show up consistently is that a franchise owned business, gets to profitability and gets to that same level of revenue much faster. And if you think about it, if you went out and started your own business and were trying to figure out what the best way is to market, you can tiptoe into it because you don't know what works. You try Google pay per click, you try TikTok, you try Facebook, you go to trade shows, you do PR. Oh, okay, you know what? This worked, this didn't. So now I'm going to push my budget more into that one. In the franchise model, the franchisor should be giving all of that to you and say, this is the channel. Here's your conversion metrics. Here's how much money it takes to get a client. Spend more. Just push the gas down more because you're going to get those clients twice as fast or however much faster. And the units end up winning because they've got that proof of concept and someone who's already been down that path before.
yeah. Yeah, like almost, yeah, like, this efficiency and speed, keep pounding on it and you're going to be a lot farther ahead. So, completely agree.
Yeah.
Um, you've mentioned, a few times, at your company, at your team, franchise marketing systems, it, focuses on, transitioning businesses from company owned to a scalable franchise system. What are like the key challenges, Chris, or any considerations that business owners really need to keep in mind when making this transition?
There are a couple of them. One, I guess, big picture is that when you franchise your business, you're getting into a new business. So if you're a burger restaurant, you've become a franchise model, you're now not in the business of selling burgers anymore. You're selling burger restaurants and the business model that wraps around it. The customer is different, the price point is different, the product you're selling is different. All those things change. And it's not like you're jumping into like a tax accounting business that's completely foreign, but it is a different business. It's kind of like a cousin to what you've been doing. So we're leveraging your intellectual property and your knowledge, but it's a new thing. So you're going to have to get used to it and learn it and get comfortable in this new model. The second thing that I've definitely run into is that most entrepreneurs, my opinion anyways, is that if you're successful as an entrepreneur, it's because you had a little bit of this like gladiator mentality. It's like kill or be killed. And you have to survive every day, every week, every month. And in the franchise model, you now become a coach and a mentor, and you're working with people who don't have that same mentality. They would have started their own thing and they came to you as a franchise company because they're looking for that direction and that help and that time and that energy. You've got to have patience. You need to have some empathy and you need to be willing to spend the time and share your knowledge and really open up to people and show them the warmth, the love, the connection, and the time and energy to make this work. And I've seen some franchisors where early on they just get frustrated, they lose patience, and you know can't deal with any more phone calls from a franchise owner. But um, the thing that I would reiterate to them is it's worth the effort. Each franchise location that you bring in, each successful franchisee that you bring in, replicates your model and scales your model exponentially. It adds incredible valuation to your business. Franchise systems get valued at anywhere from 16 to 20 times earnings. We had a brand last year that sold for 37 times earnings. And as a small business owner, normally you're lucky to get like 2 or 3 times your net. So if we're able to start proving that this thing scales, that this thing can duplicate, and it's not you as the entrepreneur that makes it work, You've got a system, you have a business model. Look, we've replicated with all these independent owners. Now, all of a sudden, you start to create value and you start to show that the business has worth to a new buyer. And it gives you that exit opportunity, or if you don't intend to sell the whole thing, it at least gives you that opportunity to step back from it.
Mhm.
And instead of grinding it out in the operations, now you can coach, mentor, help franchisees be successful, but your day-to-day activities are far less strenuous and engaging than if you're the operator.
Definitely, yeah, and it's like that saying, you want to work on the business, not in the business. And, I know that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's true even with a lot of the things that we've touched on. Because ultimately, if you can take a step back and you're not in the day to day, then you also have a clearer picture too. And I, I think everybody, but most of our audience has seen the movie The Founder, with Ray Kroc, and how, McDonald's was, formed, and how he was able to scale. And I think that's a really good, indication as well, with just, how that whole model and everything we're talking about, really has, helped him throughout his career, get to where McDonald's is now today. So,
Yeah, that, and then the saying, you can't build a business if you're stuck in it. You've got to elevate above so you can work on it. Michael Gerber, The E Myth. If anyone listening here has not read that, I strongly recommend it. And it's based on that whole principle.
yeah.
You've got to get out of the day-to-day grind, and it's easier said than done. I mean, you get pulled in. The business has tentacles that just keep pulling you back in.
Mhm.
But to be able to scale, you do. You've got to start pushing yourself up to a C level where you can lead, you can make strategic moves. If it's franchising, that's one thing. Into relationships, whatever it might be. But you, as the CEO, cannot be doing hourly wage stuff or entry level job position stuff.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it just goes back to having the right people around you, and able to delegate efficiently with what you have. So, but
Definitely.
yeah, so I want to wrap up a little bit here. So, obviously with your extensive experience, in the franchise development industry, what are some trends that you really see emerging in the franchise world, and are there any industries or concepts that you believe will significantly grow in the coming years?
We've seen a amount of growth in services. When I first got in this business 24 years ago, it was very much like traditional retail food service. That's still here. It's not like it's gone, but the big has happened in landscaping, painting, roofing, restoration, cleaning. All those categories, services categories, have absolutely exploded. There's been so many success stories of brands that have really scaled and be incredibly valuable companies through franchising in those categories. We've seen an increase in the amount of like beauty, med spa, healthcare has been good in franchising. What I'm also seeing coming is experience based retail. Retail has been like on a decline here, ever since Amazon. Certainly, big box retail you don't really want to be in still, but retail that creates an experience at the transaction, something that gives the customer a reason to be there and actually interact. We've got a brand that you make candles. There's brands where you do like the painting there at the location. There's brands that custom fit shoes for you at the location. Any kind of engagement that creates that experience at the location, that's on the rise. And I think that'll be a big category coming here soon too. And it requires much space usually too, as you can have lower overhead and more premium real estate.
Definitely. So, in-person businesses is what you're saying, um, more where you can provide value right away. You can see that result right away.
Definitely. Yeah. You don't want to, if you're in a business that you can be replaced with e-commerce, it's a tough one. It only matters of time
Yeah.
before Amazon, Jeff
Yes.
Bezos
Yeah.
even gets you.
Exactly. Yep. And with all the technology trends and AI and so many different tools being innovated, yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes it's good to go back to the old school and get back to that customer experience in person. So
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I like to kind of wrap up with a few, rapid fire questions, and then I'll leave some time, for any last remarks on your end.
Awesome.
So I'll kick it off. Our first question is, what do you feel are the key attributes of a successful entrepreneur or business owner?
Communication skills, you've got to be able to sell. Doesn't matter if you're in the pizza business or cleaning services or door-to-door sales. You have to be able to communicate. You've got to be able to sell. There's all different versions of selling, so it doesn't mean you're knocking on doors, closing deals, but you have to be able to sell whatever it is that you do. There is the next one would be positive outlook. And it sounds cheesy and generic, but I've worked with enough entrepreneurs to see it. The good ones always believe that they're going to succeed. And if something doesn't work, they have such a short memory, they're on to the next move quickly without letting that derail them. Then so effective entrepreneurs get down in the dumps, they get beaten up, and they can't let it go. They can't move on. So we've got to have a bit of that like never-ending positive energy and commit to the vision. The last thing I would put out there is that as an entrepreneur, that there's some really successful solopreneurs that make a ton of money, be successful on their own, but they will never scale. The entrepreneurs that I've worked with that can scale, play well with others in the sandbox, they're willing to share, that they're not so self-centered that they try to keep everything for themselves. They see the opportunity and the benefit of having other people involved. And you brought up Ray Kroc earlier, and a guy that I worked with who worked with him as his franchise lawyer. One of his franchise lawyers told me a story, and it just reminded me of him. But he was negotiating with a vendor. Ray Kroc walked into the room, heard the negotiation, and said, "What are you doing? You are squeezing them so tight. You might get the deal, but these guys aren't going to want to work with us for very long. You got to let them win something. You got to make this deal more equitable, and so they're going to want to do business with us." And that kind of thinking is one of the other things I've seen that made it work for entrepreneurs too.
Definitely. Yeah. You're going off your second point, fail fast, being able to pivot quickly. And, that last point right there, building, people around you that you can collaborate with and see opportunity. It's going to help your business grow tenfold. So completely agree. Next question. So what's something people think is important in business, but doesn't matter that much?
I think this is gonna might sound funny, but I having high level of like business intelligence is probably overrated. I can say that sort of giving taking a shot at myself. I was BA, did the 4-year degree, did the MBA, did everything that I was told I should do to become a good business person. And then I went to work doing this and I'd interact with entrepreneurs. I'm like, I know nothing. I literally know nothing. And half the time the entrepreneur would have no education, would have no formal, sort of degrees or anything. I think you learn by doing. I think you've got to get out there. You've got to get punched in the nose. You've got to play the game and be in it, and how you learn. And I think that you should put too much importance on getting a Harvard MBA before you can be considered a good business person. Get out there and do it. Take some shots. Find the right channel to do something entrepreneurial, and then figure out your threshold for risk and that kind of thing. But you got to get into it. And the longer you sit on the sideline, I personally believe, because I went through it, I never would have become an entrepreneur had I not been pushed into it. I think so many people have bottled up opportunity and bottled up potential because they're stuck in a cubicle somewhere and they're afraid to lose the W-2 and they don't want to lose that 401k and holding them back. And you can start to take steps maybe first to get into the entrepreneurial game. You'll end up being happier. You'll get more out of life. You'll make more money. I mean, all that stuff starts to happen, but you got to get into it and start getting playing the game.
Just completely agree so much there. And it's like get into the weeds, and I'll never understand those that go to college to study entrepreneurship. Nothing against them, but it's even business too. I studied business, and it's like I've always learned from having a mentor, shadowing others, trying to provide value to others, and then learning from them. Even, going out to coffee with somebody, you're going to learn a lot more than, sitting in a classroom. And even, taking courses, those are great too. But, when you start doing it yourself and you're in the weeds, you're going to learn and grow. So,
Agreed. Totally agree.
yeah, definitely. Last question. What are the top 3 tips just about business, branding that you want our audience and your audience to walk away with today?
Top 3 tips. One, I would say if you are a business owner and you're looking for ways to scale, if you have not already, look at franchising as a viable path. You should have this on your list as one of the ways you could take your intellectual property and your model and grow it and build from it and with it. Two, I would say if you're a potential entrepreneur and potential franchise investor, take your time, do your due diligence, but look at franchising versus starting your own business. Compare, contrast, and make sure that you're using your resources before you make a decision to whether it's invest in a franchise or start your own business. There's way too many resources out there for you not to benefit and much those things. And the third is, I think probably going back to our last couple of points is just that, if you have something, if it created a brand or you're looking to take the first steps in entrepreneurship, why couldn't you do this? Why can't it be you? And as entrepreneurs, we have friends, we have people we know. Now with social media, we hear all about stuff. Why can other people be successful and do this and win with small business ownership and you can't? You have to find the right path and courage to take those first steps. But it's out there, you just got to find it.
Definitely. Yep. And it's making sure, you're in the right vehicle too. And um, one of my mentors always says, know what seat you are on the bus. So like, really know your strengths and what you're good at. And, if you're not enjoying the marketing and the branding behind your company and the social media, then, hire somebody to do that if you have the budget, and stick to the things that you're good at, whether that's building teams or doing the financials. So really just kind of know your role in the company and within your position.
Yeah,
But
definitely agree.
yeah, awesome. Well, I'm excited, to see your growth and see really kind of where your company is going to go this year, Chris. Is there anything specifically you're looking forward to? Big.
I'm excited about 2024. I think 2023 was it wasn't a bad year, but it wasn't a growth year either. A lot of like anxiety, uncertainty. I think coming out of COVID to whatever situations that created. This year, I think is positioned for growth. We're going to see some sort of a drop in interest rates. There's still a whole lot of interest in entrepreneurship and growth in entrepreneurship. So we have huge expectations for the franchise market and for entrepreneurship in general. I think it's going to be a good year.
Definitely. Yep. And I think, there's a lot of positivity still in business. That we have a lot on to lean on, and so many different tools and things to automate our businesses. So I completely agree. It's exciting stuff happening. So, but where can people find you, Chris?
Our company is Franchise Marketing Systems. Our website is www.fmsfranchise.com. But shoot, you can call me on my cell phone. I mean, I'm accessible. My cell is 770-519-3910. And would love to talk to anyone looking at entrepreneurship, particularly looking at franchising, but always open to discussions. Love talking to entrepreneurs, and please don't hesitate.
Awesome. And we'll put your information and everything attached to this video when we drop in a few weeks. So, but it's been an honor hearing your story, Chris, and learning about your experience, just in the franchising industry, growing your company. And I'm really, excited to see the growth you have this year. And it was great, meeting you and talking to you. So
You too, Alex. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
anytime, welcome back anytime. But awesome. Well, this was another edition of the Skill and Secrets podcast. Till next time. Thanks, guys. All right.